In my last Matt Millen video, I talked about Matt Millen's trading. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Matt Millen's drafting, which he is most famous for, or infamous for, in terms of how bad he drafted. And just like with the last video, if you came here expecting me to just tear this man to shreds, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed. I'm going to point out what he did, give you my general thoughts on it, and I'm going to try to keep it as even keel as I possibly can. Also, I'm not going to be talking about every single draft pick, but I'm going to talk about some notable draft picks and what we could have had. Starting off with Matt Millen's first draft. With the 18th overall pick, the Detroit Lions selected Jeff Backus, who was mostly a punching bag for Detroit Lions fans. Steve Hutchinson, a Hall of Fame guard, was selected one spot before Backus, and Casey Hampton, who was a pretty solid nose tackle, was selected just one spot later. In round 2, the Detroit Lions traded back. They traded their 48th overall pick to the Patriots for the 50th and 173rd pick. The Lions drafted Dominic Raiola, who was also a punching bag amongst Detroit Lions fans. The Patriots ended up selecting Matt Light with the 48th pick, who was a solid left tackle for Tom Brady. Also in the second round, the Lions traded their 78th and 114th overall picks to the Giants for the 61st overall pick. The Lions drafted three-time Pro Bowler Shawn Rogers, who had a very solid career for the Lions. That's a good pick. You can say whatever you want about Matt Millen, but that's a good pick. Shawn Rogers definitely was. His late round drafting was mostly suspect, and it was suspect in this particular season. In the 5th round, the Lions drafted Scotty Anderson, who lasted 3 seasons in the NFL and had 4 touchdowns in 34 games. And then also in the 5th round, the Lions traded their 180th and 216th overall picks to the Patriots for the 149th overall pick, and they drafted Mike McMahon, 149th overall, and his career stat line read 15 touchdowns to 21 interceptions. So in all honesty, all things considered, the 2001 draft class was pretty okay. Jeff Backus and Dominic Raiola, did they deserve all the hate they got? I honestly couldn't tell you. I mean, they started plenty of seasons for the Lions, so I don't know. Matt Millen's first draft, to me, was okay. Things didn't get quite thrown off the rails in the 2002 draft, but it was the beginning of things getting thrown off the rails. With the 3rd overall pick, the Detroit Lions drafted quarterback Joey Harrington. The Lions missed on Brian McKinney, Roy Williams, not the receiver, the 5-time Pro Bowl safety, John Henderson, Dwight Freeney, and Ed Reed. Now, the Freeney and Reed picks are somewhat forgivable, seeing that they were selected more than 5 spots later, but we'll get to that a little later. But the Lions missed on some players, certainly. In round 2, the Detroit Lions selected Kalimba Edwards, 35th overall, and he had 31 sacks in 101 career games. Pro Bowl center Andre Gurode was selected just 2 spots later. In round 3, Millen made an okay pick, drafting Andre Goodman, 68th overall. He didn't have a great NFL career, but he had a solid NFL career. He had 2 5-interception seasons. Nothing world-beating, but it's notable. In round 4, the Lions drafted John Taylor, 134th overall, and he never played in the NFL. In round 5, the Lions drafted John Owens, 138th overall, and he had 178 yards in 76 games. Like I said, Matt Millen's late round drafting was suspect at best. I don't know why I said his late round drafting was suspect at best, honestly, because his drafting as a whole was suspect at best. In the 2003 draft, the Lions drafted Charles Rogers, 2nd overall, R.I.P. Charles Rogers. Andre Johnson was selected just 1 spot later. And some other notable players the Lions missed on include Terrence Newman, who was selected 5th, Jordan Gross, who was selected 8th, Kevin Williams, and Terrell Suggs, who was selected 10th. R.I.P. Charles Rogers, but Matt Millen, I'm sorry Matt Millen, but this pick was kind of inexcusable. Especially when the best receiver in the class was literally selected just 1 spot later. In round 2, the Detroit Lions drafted Boss Bailey, 34th overall. He didn't really have that remarkable of a career, and some players that were selected after Bailey include Charles Tillman, who was selected just one spot later, and some other players the Lions missed out on include John Stinchcomb and Rashean Mathis. In round 3, the Lions drafted Corey Redding, who was a defensive end, 66th overall. Some notable players the Lions missed on in round 3 include Lance Briggs, who was taken 68th, and Jason Witten, who was taken 69th. They were both selected less than 5 spots later. You don't have to hit on every mid and late round pick, and you shouldn't expect your GM to hit on every mid and late round pick, but you gotta hit on at least some of them, don't you? And this was a prime opportunity to hit on one of those mid-round picks, and it just did not happen. I don't really need to talk too much about this draft because this is the draft where things really could have started going in the right direction, and it just couldn't happen. To start off, the Lions traded their 6th overall pick to the Browns for the 7th overall pick. They also got a second in return for that. The Lions used that pick to draft Roy Williams, who had one good season for the Lions, but was mostly underwhelming. If the Lions would have just stayed at 6, they could have drafted Kellen Winslow Jr. Or if we just stick to what actually happened and they trade back, the Lions could have had D'Angelo Hall, who was selected right after Roy Williams was, or they could have had Ben Roethlisberger, or they could have had Jonathan Vilma. The other first-round pick they had was Kevin Jones. They acquired the 30th overall pick by trading the 36th and 105th overall picks to the Chiefs. Kevin Jones had a solid rookie season, but was mostly underwhelming after that. The Lions missed out on Chris Snee and Carlos Dansby. If there was a draft where you could officially say things are completely off the rails, it is the 2005 draft. The Lions drafted wide receiver Mike Williams 10th overall. And this is interesting because when you watch Matt Millen's football life, his son said that they were going to take DeMarcus Ware, and then they decided to take Mike Williams at the last second. So, yeah, this wasn't good, especially when DeMarcus Ware was selected right after Mike Williams was, and we all know how great DeMarcus Ware was. Other players the Lions missed on include Sean Merriman, Jamal Brown, Thomas Davis, and Derek Johnson. All those players were literally selected right after Mike Williams was selected. Then in round 2, the Lions traded the 41st and 113th overall picks to the Titans for the 37th overall pick, and the Lions selected Sean Cody, 37th overall, and he was mostly underwhelming, as I've said many times about many of these draft picks. The Lions missed on Michael Ruse, Lofa Tatupu, and Nick Collins. And then in round 3, the Lions selected Stanley Wilson, who played 32 career games, and Justin Tuck was selected just 2 spots later. In 2006, the Lions picked a pretty good player in Ernie Sims 9th overall, but in all honesty, I probably would much rather have had Haloti Ngata than Ernie Sims, and Ngata was selected just 3 spots after Sims was. And some other notable players the Lions could have drafted include Chad Greenway, Antonio Cromartie, and Tamba Ali. In the second round, the Lions selected Daniel Bullocks, 40th overall. And some notable players the Lions missed on include Roman Harper, who was selected just 3 spots later, along with Marcus McNeil, who was selected 50th, Greg Jennings, who was selected 52nd, and Andrew Whitworth, who was selected 55th. I mean, in all honesty, this draft class was just kind of whatever. In 2007, Matt Millen capitalized on a draft that included Calvin Johnson, Joe Thomas, Adrian Peterson, Patrick Willis, Marshawn Lynch, Darrelle Revis, Joe Staley, Greg Olson, and many others as well. So the first round of the 2007 draft was honestly pretty phenomenal. But good for Millen. He capitalized on it, and he selected Calvin Johnson. Overall, though, this draft was meh. One draft pick does not make a good class. In round 2, the Lions traded the 34th pick to the Bills for the 43rd and 74th overall picks, and the Lions selected Drew Stanton, 43rd overall. If the Lions would have just stayed at 34 instead of trading back, they could have had Eric Weddle, who ended up getting selected 37th, or Paul Posluszny, who the Bills drafted when they traded up. And also in round 2, the Lions traded the 74th and 101st pick to the Ravens for the 61st overall pick. The Lions drafted Gerald Alexander 61st overall, and if they would have just stayed where they were at, they could have just taken Marshall Yanda, and the 3rd round would have been a success. And this draft class would have been phenomenal. Matt Millen's last draft was in 2008, and it was more of the same. This class was one of his better drafts because he got Cliff Averill in the 3rd round. This draft, in many ways, embodied what his other drafts looked like. In round 1, the Lions traded the 15th and 76th overall picks to the Chiefs for the 17th, 66th, and 136th overall picks. The Lions selected Gosderchelis 17th overall, and he is another offensive lineman that was a punching bag amongst the Lions fans. If the Lions would have just stayed at 15th, they could have taken Brandon Albert. Or they could have taken Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie. And even with them trading back, they could have taken Aqib Talib. In round 2, the Lions selected Jordan Dizon, and he was mostly underwhelming, just like almost every one of Matt Millen's picks. The Lions could have had Deshaun Jackson or Calais Campbell. In round 3, the Lions traded the 66th and 176th picks to the Dolphins for the 64th pick. The Lions drafted Kevin Smith, 64th overall. Jamal Charles was selected 73rd overall. So they probably could have just stayed where they were at and gotten Jamal Charles. But we all know Jamal Charles had his own injury issues. I think we probably all would have rather had Jamal Charles than Kevin Smith. Also in round 3, the Lions drafted Cliff Averill, 92nd overall, by trading the 111th pick and a 2009 4th round pick. I'm going to call out if Matt Millen did something right, and he did something right by drafting Cliff Averill. So now that I have 2020 hindsight, I'm going to try to fix the mistakes. The reality here, though, is that there's too many mistakes to fix. Matt Millen's tenure wasn't just, oh, if we would have just taken that player, or if we would have just taken this player. There's way too many things that we would have to salvage here. And also, I should be clear when I do this that I have hindsight on my side. Matt Millen, when he made these picks, did not have hindsight. I guess what I'm getting at is that it's easy for me, who is doing this well after the fact, instead of being in the position and having almost the weight of the world on your shoulders, or at the very least, the weight of the city of Detroit on your shoulders. I'm not going to fix every little thing, but I'm going to try to be as realistic as I can in terms of what they could have done and what we could have actually had the Lions look like during the Matt Millen tenure. So, in 2001, trade up and draft Steve Hutchinson. And even with that trade up, we still could have gotten Shaun Rogers in the 2nd round. And then in the 2002 draft Dwight Freeney instead of Joey Harrington. And also, let's go ahead and trade up and draft Ed Reed. Then in 2003, this is a pretty easy fix because Andre Johnson was selected literally one spot after Charles Rogers was. Then in round 2, draft Charles Tillman instead of Boss Bailey. In round 3, draft Jason Witten instead of Corey Redding. Now, you can't hit on every one of your 3rd round picks, but you gotta hit on some of them. And 2003 was a prime opportunity to hit on at least one 3rd round pick. In 2004, still trade back, but take Ben Roethlisberger instead of Roy Williams. And then 2005 was pretty inexcusable. All we had to do was pick DeMarcus Ware instead of Mike Williams, which the Lions were going to do according to Matt Millen's son, but they took Mike Williams at the last second. This right here is what the Detroit Lions could have looked like during the Matt Millen era. This is a Super Bowl contender right here. I'd even go as far as to say this is a Super Bowl winning team right here. Now, of course, we all know this did not happen, but it's certainly interesting to look at this and think maybe what could have been. But we're not going to dwell on the past too much, and I'm not going to dwell on the past too much because it is what it is at this point. It's just an interesting thing to look at. Well, that will be all for this video. Do you guys think this realistically could have been how the Lions looked? Do you even agree with what I would have done? And what do you think of Matt Millen's drafting? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching.